No, conveners, no apologies.
Do we have any declarations of interest at all? No. Have we all read the minutes? And do we agree the minutes, or do we have any? Okay. And we'll go on to number 4, council accounts. I believe it's yourself, Amanda.
Things have used. Oh, that's it now. Thank you, convener. So the purpose of the paper today is to ask the committee to consider the unaudited accounts for the council. The audit of the accounts is well underway, and that will be reported to Audit Committee later in the year. And it's worth highlighting that these accounts will be audited by Audit Scotland this year. So the 22-23 accounts cover the first year of their audit appointment. The accounts are subject to the Local Authority Accounts Regulations 2014, and that's quite prescriptive in terms of timeframes that the unaudited accounts should be completed and considered by the Audit Committee. The accounts have to be completed by the 30th of June and passed to the external auditor by that date, and the council did meet that deadline. The Audit Committee have to consider the unaudited accounts by the 31st of August, and this meeting ensures that the council meets that requirement. And there's also the requirement to notify the public that the accounts are available for inspection, and that inspection period must last for 3 weeks. And in our case, that ran from the 29th of June to the 19th of July. And at that point, the public have the option to make an objection to the accounts. And they would report that to our auditors, Audit Scotland, but no objections were lodged. So just turning to the accounts themselves, as in previous years, there's 2 sort of key areas to focus on. One is the management commentary and one is the governance statement. So the management commentary should summarise the key messages about the council's performance, which is financial and non-financial. And it should give a fair view of the council's position. So as I had said, I think last year, the picture presented in the commentary should really be familiar to members based on what you've heard at committee, the reports we've already presented and things like that. So part of the ask today is to be sure that you're comfortable and happy with what's in there. And as I said at the meeting last year as well, we try and strike a balance between ensuring there's sufficient information in the management commentary so that there is a true and fair picture presented, but also at the same time trying to keep the accounts to a reasonable length, because at the moment they're running to around about 100 pages. So if we turn to the management commentary itself, the management commentary cross-references to the council's Falkirk Performs website for public performance reporting, and it summarises the position in respect of the local government benchmarking framework, and that's on page 16 of the agenda. So that information and the 22-23 performance was considered in some detail by Scrutiny Committee on the 1st of June when the 22-23 end of year public performance report for 22-23 was presented. And I suppose that's what I mean in terms of the links between this document and the documents that you'll have received at other points in the year. There also are some highlights in terms of service delivery achievements, and these are set out at the bottom of pages 16 and further into page 17. And then the financial performance section of the management commentary starts on page 18 of the agenda. And again, it should reflect the outturn reports for revenue and capital that the executive considered on the 13th of June. So all the information should be familiar. The table at the bottom of page 18 aims to show in a sort of summary format the movement from the outturn reported to members and the outturn as reported in the Comprehensive Income and Expenditure Statement, the CIES, which is on page 46 of the agenda. I think we recognise the accounts are quite difficult to navigate, There's a lot of statutory adjustments, for example, that we have to make between what we present to you at committee and what we have to put in the accounts. So examples of that are things like depreciation, which are in the accounts in the CIES, but they're not in the budgetary control statement because it's a notional charge as opposed to a cash charge, so we don't include it. And another example at the bottom of page 18, you'll see an adjustment for government grants of just around 43 million. The reason for that is because the CIES has to have all the government grants, including capital grants. So we don't include that in our revenue reports to the members. So these are the kind of differences that you would see, but hopefully we've tried to show some of that in the accounts and be quite transparent about the adjustments that have to be made. So I think that sort of emphasises why the management commentary is such an important piece of the accounts, because it's really the most accessible part of the accounts, or it should be. And our auditors, they'll review this statement and they'll consider whether it's got sufficient information and advise us what we can do to improve it, and we'll take that on board either for the audited accounts or for future iterations. So the financial performance elements should be familiar to everyone after June exec. I'll highlight a few points, and that's just that the council had budgeted for a deficit of 5 million, so we plan to use reserves, general fund reserves, but the overall expenditure was 4.7 million less than budgeted, and the main reasons for that are set out in page 19, and that includes excuse me, an improvement in the energy costs against the budget, employee savings and savings resulting from the teachers' strike. And that leaves our general fund uncommitted reserves at 31st of March at 11.8 million. The housing revenue account for 22-23 included a planned deficit of 600,000, which was coming from the housing revenue account reserves, and the outturn was in line with that budget. And then in terms of capital, there was spend of 39.3 million in the general fund and 60.2 million on the housing side, and that was reported on the 13th of June to the executive. So if I move on to the annual governance statement, again, that's a really important statement for the audit committee to consider, and again, it should reflect what you understand and what the reports that you've received throughout the year. Should reflect your understanding of the council's governance arrangements, and that starts on page 27 of the agenda. So section 2 of the statement sets out the council's risk and assurance framework, and section 3 looks at the adequacy and effectiveness of the governance framework. Section 3 references the best value assurance work that's been in place since the last report in 2021. And also the activities of the audit committee and the internal audit team. So members will have received the annual assurance report for 22-23 from the internal audit risk and corporate fraud manager at the audit committee on the 19th of June 2023, and that report highlighted that internal audit can provide substantial assurance on the council's arrangements for risk management, governance and control for the year to 31st of March 2023, and that is summarised on page 30 of the agenda. And then section 4 of the annual governance statement on page 32 highlights some significant additional actions that have been identified in 22-23 alongside some ongoing actions from 21-22. So those actions have been aligned with the SIPFA principles. An audit committee will want some assurance that these actions are taking place as planned, and in April, as part of the corporate risk management report, it was agreed the audit committee would receive a 6-monthly update on the annual governance statement as we go forward. So as I mentioned earlier, the audit process is underway. We're not aware of any material issues at this stage, albeit it is relatively early days. Audit Scotland had early engagement with us about the deadlines for considering the audited accounts, recognising that it was unlikely that the deadline of 30th of September would be achieved at this point. And a big part of that is because it is the first year of the audit. That brings a huge amount of work, and it also means that we started some of the audit work a bit later than we would normally expect. So our sort of first meetings were a bit later than we would normally expect in the process. But we are very grateful that we've had that early engagement with Audit Scotland and that we understand the timeframes. So at this point, we're planning to bring the audited accounts to the 6th of November Audit Committee for approval. And then finally, I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank all of the finance team who have worked hard to produce the annual accounts. As you can see, it's 100 pages or so. It's a very laborious, time-consuming exercise for everyone, and I'm really grateful for all the work that they put in. And I also want to thank the Internal Audit, Risk and Corporate Fraud Manager and the Corporate Risk Coordinator for all the work that goes into the annual governance statement, which again is a big exercise to pull all that together. And I'm very grateful to Isabel and her team for that. And I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Amanda, and please give our thanks to your team. Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, Convener, and I would echo your thanks to the team, because it's no mean feat in pulling together an annual report such as this, considering all the other work streams that are going on at the same time, and embedding new auditors as well. I don't have any questions directly for Mrs Templeman, but I do have a couple of questions for our Chief Executive. Just again to help triangulate views here. I just wondered if Mr Laurie was satisfied that the Council's annual governance statement accurately reflects the risk environment and the actions that we are taking to look to improve that.
Mr Laurie.
Yeah, thank you, Convener, and thanks to Councillor Meikle-John. I mean, I am satisfied with that. I think we're operating in a very dynamic environment. I think we need to keep on top of the kind of risks and challenges we face as a council. These are set out in the annual governance statement. I think also as officers, we've been very clear with elected members throughout the course of the year about the nature of the challenges we face and the responses we need to make in relation to that, not least in respect of the issue of financial sustainability. So I do think that I am content with the governance statement as it stands, but I do think both as officers and as elected members, we just need to be really wary and on top of the kind of issues which are set out in there, because these are the challenges which will be very significant for us as a council as we move over the next period.
Thank you. Just a supplementary to that, again to the Chief Executive, if he is satisfied that the Council's demonstrated that the governance will support the achievement of the authority's objectives and deliver on our Council plan.
Mr Laurie.
Yes, thank you, Convener. I think that the governance arrangements we have in place are robust and effective in that regard. I think that, and members will have noted the references that Amanda made to performance. I still think in terms of delivery of the council plan and the objectives and the measures we have set out in that, we have quite a lot of work to do. And I spoke very openly to the Scrutiny Committee back on the 1st of June about my own views about how well we were doing in performance. In fact, that we've got more work to be doing on that. And in the context of the council plan, we're bringing the updated version of the council plan to the council in September. As officers, we've been very focused on the performance aspect of that in terms of the indicators set out and what the targets are in relation to these indicators. So I think in terms of governance, our position is good. I think in terms of performance, albeit we've had in the last few weeks even a lot of positive reflections on performance in Falkirk, not least in terms of, for example, our shortlistings for COSLA awards, which have been very good. But I still think there's quite a bit of work to be done in that. We need to up our performance in certain key areas for the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener.
Anyone else? Councillor Spears.
Thank you, Convener. I have 3 questions. Firstly, is the Chief Finance Officer satisfied that the management commentary accurately reflects Falkirk Council in 22-23?
Thank you, Convener, Councillor Spears. I am comfortable that it sets out a good summation of our highlights and also our financial summary. I always think that we, whenever we get a sort of change of auditors, we get a different perspective, and I think that will be really helpful to get some sense from them of how they feel. It reflects our position, and we have committed to doing a lot more work in terms of public performance reporting, and I think that may change how we reflect some of that information, the management commentary going forward. But in terms of the information that's in there, I'm happy that it's an accurate reflection of the year.
Okay, in answer to that, I think we should compliment you and your staff for the sheer volume of work. If it was hard to do, if it was half as hard to do as it was to read, then well done. I'd like to a couple of questions on your management commentary statement. On page 17, we have one, the majority of school leavers achieved level 4 awards in literacy, etc. Can I ask Mr. Greenhorn if there will be a full list of our schools and their performance, and will that come forward to the Education Executive?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Spears. Councillor Spears, there's a report going to the Education, Children and Young People Executive on attainment in schools. As you're probably aware, that we don't ordinarily break down the attainment per school, but we do provide a summary of the attainment across the councils overall, and also make comparisons to the national average for Scotland and our own comparator authorities. What I'm happy to do, Convener, is I can share that report once it's available with Councillor Spears.
Okay, thank you. I noticed that other local authorities in Scotland are sharing that information with a wider public, and I can't understand why we're not sharing it with the people of Falkirk District. Okay, my next question is, you mentioned government grants. Now, we took the opportunity at full council to write to the Scottish Government regarding the grant for the Grangemouth Flood Protection Scheme. Can you tell us where we are and what stage, and if we got an answer back?
Thank you, Councillor Spears. My understanding from a discussion on Friday is that there's a letter due to us imminently from the Scottish Government, but as far as I understand, we haven't received that yet. But we were told by a colleague at COSLA on Friday that we would be getting a letter imminently.
Well, I certainly am waiting to see that. Thank you.
Does anyone else have questions? Councillor Hannah. Councillor Patrick, do you have anything to ask? Okay. No more, Councillor Forrest?
Nothing from me either, thanks.
Okay. Are we all happy to accept the report then? Or no?
Happy to agree.
Yes.
Happy
Happy
to
to agree.
Okay, thank you. Is that everything on that? Okay. In that case, I conclude this morning's meeting. Thank you so much for attending, especially given the bad weather.
Thank you.